We are live right now. Joining the Fight Bananas podcast, my friend Felix Levine. Where's this going podcast, my man? How you doing?
Thank you so much. What's up, man? Thank you for having me. I'm thrilled to be on. So let's roll, man.
Absolutely, brother. First and foremost, how did you get into it? Love the podcast game. I'm a tad older than you, just a little bit, but we'll talk about that in a second. But how'd you get into podcast? Where'd you first hear it? When? What was the idea? What was that breakthrough moment of, oh, I want my own show. I want this going on. So take it away.
So speaking of, so yes, I'm probably slightly younger, although you're a good-looking dude. I'm probably a little bit younger, but so my freshman year of college, so last year, I was at UC Santa Barbara. I'm originally from New York,
Right.
And I knew once I got there that I was going to transfer back east. And so at that point, I also had a girlfriend at the time that was living in New York, so I was very not present in Santa Barbara, and so I kind of, once I started applying to go back eastward, I very much isolated myself, I'd say, socially, and I had a lot of time on my hands, so I was basically just grinding school, doing my applications, and then I was like, I've heard of this Joe Rogan podcast thing. Let me take a listen,
Right.
So I start listening to Rogan, and I'm like, wow, now I understand the fucking hype. That was the first time I ever listened to a podcast. It was about probably around this time last year. And so I would listen, and then I just got hooked, and I'd start listening to maybe 3, 4, 5, 6 hours of podcasts of Rogan daily. Like, it would be in between class. I would bike to class. I'd listen to Rogan. I'd get out. I'd listen to more Rogan. It got to a point where there were kids on my dorm that they would ask me to get dinner, and I would start making up excuses on why I wasn't going to get dinner with them, just so I could, I'd rather listen to Rogan talk to Bilzerian or Elon Musk or Mike Tyson or whoever it is. So
Right.
at that point, I was listening to so much, and I realized that while I was listening, I would think of like questions or things that I'd be wondering about his guests, and perhaps a couple minutes later he'd ask it, and I was like, wait a minute, like, I like the way he thinks, and I realized how much I was learning as well from just listening. And
Right.
so for me, I was like, hold up, I'd always felt comfortable speaking with people, and I always was very curious about what made like great people tick. And I was like, why don't I get into it? I mean, why not? And so it was probably around end of March. I really was starting to get serious about the idea. I had a break coming up. I knew someone who could do the graphic design, and it was really like, all right, how do I get started with this whole thing? And speaking of the age thing, is like, because I'm younger and because I don't have this career behind me. I'm still very much in my younger years. How do I, start to market myself? How do I make someone want to come on the show? And so for me, it was really through getting professional audio engineering, video editing, doing things about as professionally as I could to take away the fact that I was on the younger side. And then just, put in the work. Like, when you say, like, put in 10,000 hours, like, for me, it was like put in 20,000. Like, it was just like nonstop every day. We're going to send 500 emails. We're going to reach out to sponsors. We're going to reach out to guests. If I get like, as what I was saying a little while back on one of my shows, it was like, if I had a 1% acceptance yes rate of a guest that would say yes to come on the show, one of every 100 emails I sent, I would be thrilled. And at that point, it really was that. It was like, where do I start? First, it was like, use the connections that I already had, maybe get one guest here, one guest there, and then things started happening really, really quickly. And then it got to you're a big UFC MMA guy. I mean, it got to 4th episode in. It was Eric Anders, who I'm actually repping his shirt. Shout out to your boy.
Hey.
And so once I got him, that was a big moment for me, because I watch a lot of UFC. And then I went to John Anik, and then it was like I was back in New York, and I started getting all the guys from Team Tiger Schulman's. And then we have a couple of very big guests coming up in the UFC world soon. So things have been happening pretty quickly. But I'd say that was a little backstory.
Damn, I love it. I love the backstory for sure. I love origin stories. Big superhero, big Marvel fan. Love origin stories. So we'll get back into that a little bit. Okay, so you said something that's so glaring to me. I love it. I actually put a little IG post on it today about the chip on my shoulder. Miss Danielle Kelly was on the show probably around 20 episodes ago. She just got her black belt. She's just a mega superstar in the work. She's like 23, 24, about to just take over the world. Star. And the whole podcast, she just kept on coming back. Chip on the shoulder. This is what I want to do, but I have a chip on my shoulder. I was like, wow, like, that's one thing for sure. Successful people, Elon Musk, Joe Rogan, right? There's like this chip on the shoulder of people saying no. I'm so with you, man. Like, We have 7 sponsors on the show. They're amazing. And one thing that's been really cool with me, every time, almost every sponsor we've had, I think 8 or 9 total. Out of the 7, right? Like they've been with us since day one. Like we push the brands. I'm looking at Space Coast Botanicals right here, the best CBD stuff in the business. You know what I'm saying?
Shout out.
So, right. So like all emails, DMs, phone calls, 100. I'm like 200. You know what I mean? And we've been rolling. We've had over like 140 episodes. We've had over 100 UFC fighters, UFC champions, some of the best agents in the game. And we're not stopping. We're just rolling. We got a couple humongous guests coming up literally this week. So like when I hear that from you, I'm like, man, that's I feel like that's me. That was me years ago.
I love it, man. And that's impressive. You know, that's also, I mean, I was checking out your show and it looks fantastic, and I'll have to listen to more. But I mean, that's really what it comes down to. You know, when you start from the ground up, it's like things don't just magically happen. You know, Jon Anik doesn't magically come on your show. These fighters don't magically come on your show. It's just, you know, I think it's right place, right time, a little bit of luck. But at the end of the day, it's if you don't grind out those emails, if you don't reach out to those 7-8 sponsors like you're talking about, if you don't put in the work, it doesn't happen.
Absolutely. And another cool thing I like about it is almost every guest I had, every single time I ask them to come back, they say 100%. Oh, dude, I love this show. And that's some of the most rewarding stuff is like they text me afterwards or call me afterwards like, dude, that was a dope show. Like it was fun. You know, how's your training camp? Do you want to be world champion? It's like everyone asks the same 6 questions. I want to know what their favorite movie is. I want to know how they got into the fight game. Did you get beat up as a kid? You know, were you bullied? Like all this stuff. And they're like, dang, you know, we were just chit-chatting. I forgot it was an interview instead of it's a conversation. That's a podcast. That's a Joe Rogan podcast. I just want to drive down the road. I was down the highway listening to the podcast. It's just chatter. It's back and forth. So I love it, man. Talking about CBD, right? I threw this out there, and it's you know, I'm 35, grew up, born in 84, during the 90s, MTV, all that stuff. CBD is like the hottest craze, and especially your age group, right? You're 19, about to be 20?
Yes, sir. Tomorrow, actually.
Hey! Well, birthday. We're going to drop this, or we'll drop it on your birthday.
Beautiful.
I love it. Be a present for sure.
Yes.
Okay, so CBD is humongous, right? For you guys, it's like, it's everywhere. Everyone I know, I have like just every person I know says, Dave, what about this? Because, you know, I promote it and I use it. It's amazing. It works for me. So I just want to talk about that. Let's just kind of go on wherever it goes. But CBD as a craze and all.
Yeah, I think, I mean, I actually, one of my sponsors earlier on was Infinite CBD. I'm no longer really with them, but they were a great company. And quite frankly, I loved, I don't smoke any weed or any of that. So I always associated CBD with like marijuana and stuff like that. And some people do, and there are ways to have the two together. But CBD has been great for me. I got my wisdom teeth pulled this summer, and I actually would put some of the droplets in my mouth, and it would relax everything. It was just, I love CBD. I think for fighters and athletes, especially people in the either fight game or NFL athletes that are taking a lot of hits to the head. I hear there's a lot of positive effects in that regard. So yeah, I think it's really coming up in the game. I think it's really like the hot thing. I think around people my age group, it's still, some people know about it, some people don't. I don't know how many people really use it. But I think especially in the MMA UFC game, I mean, it's I think a great way to relax your body.
Absolutely, man. And everything I've been hearing, I bet you within 4 months, 6 months, there's going to be a really big announcement with CBD and UFC. I'm just throwing that out there. So when you hear that, you're going to be like,
you called it.
Dave on the Fight Bananas podcast, we heard it out there. So like, I was mentioning the age. I grew up with MTV and Total Request Live, American Idol. Like this was just my childhood, my teenage years. And now, like, to me, your age group, which I love, like you got to evolve with the times. And I'm not that guy like, oh, get off my lawn guy. I love it. iPhone 11. We stream everything. Cable is just so old school. Like, and I listen to nothing podcasts. I don't know what a radio station is. It's, you know, so my question, like our topic is, you know, how do you listen to stuff? Or do you stream everything? And same thing with people your age group. Do you think streaming is going to be everything? Do you think podcasts, like, I think sooner or later there's just going to be like a platform with just nothing but podcasts. Like you can go to Joe Rogan or Where's This Going podcast and Fight Bananas podcast and Fox Sports. I think it's all going to be on one platform. You like that? You agree with that?
Yeah, I think I agree with that as well. And I think, because I'm in school right now, I really, I'm thinking about it. I really wish there were classes that were just the homework is go listen to this podcast, go listen to that podcast, write a paper on this, listen to this episode and write a reflection on that. Because I realized probably in the last year, I mean, this is sad because I pay a lot of money to go to university, but I realized that I learned maybe perhaps more from podcasts. And I think, there's like, you start, like my friends will make fun of me and they'll be like, oh, you little podcast or whatever. But the reality is, I mean, so many stories and so many things that I've learned. I believe you can learn so much from listening to two smart individuals speak. And especially, people that are sometimes in different fields, like, if you have, let's say a Rogan with a Dan Bilzerian, the way those two personalities match up, I mean, it's so interesting to see. And even if you have, maybe someone who's not even from the UFC fight game talk to a fighter, I mean, that is also for me a really interesting dynamic. So I think podcasts are really amazing. And I think, but being on the inside and having your own, you get to develop these relationships with people and ask them really everything you want. And I always hate when people say, are you ready for your interview? Like for me, it's never really an interview. I like to think of them more as conversations. And I think, an interview is like Anderson Cooper sitting down with President Trump. I think, me sitting down with like a Jimmy Rivera or a Lyman Good is, yeah, of course, it's more in the guided sense of I'm going to guide the conversation. I'm going to ask them things. But, I've had some of my favorite interactions have been when they ask me a question. Or I had comedian Mark Normand on, and he starts grilling me about my family life and my heritage. And that was fun, too. So I think, I think there could be one day a platform just for podcasts. But I think we're going into a world where radio is dying out. I think newspapers are kind of dying out. And I think for me, what I realized about podcasts is as opposed to reading something is I can listen to a podcast when I'm cooking. I can listen to it in the shower. I can listen to it on my walk to school. Like I can do it whenever. And there's so much power and knowledge that can be conveyed in a sit down conversation in a really relaxed setting, I think.
For sure, dude. I wake up every morning and I open up Twitter and Instagram, and it's like, oh, what happened last night? What's going on with sports? I love basketball, baseball, but mostly mixed martial arts. What's happening in politics? Okay, that crazy thing's going on. Okay, Twitter. Oh, my friend said something funny. Cool. All right, I'm ready to start the day. Like, it's 2020. Newspapers, and I just think it would be so cool. You go to you go buy a car, and like some of the cars have like Pandora's already in them or iHeartRadio. I'm telling you, man, it's gonna be like just a podcast platform. It's gonna be like, oh crap, Joe Rogan, best of, and sports, if that's what you want to listen to, or just what would you describe? All right, so someone not listening, hey guys, we're talking with Felix Levine. Where's This Going podcast? A brand new audience we're going to bring to you hopefully right now. If you had to describe within a minute, 2 minutes about your podcast, what is it about? What are you trying to get out of it? What will you tell the Fight Bananas community?
That's a great question. I think for me, when I think about it, of course, I had Professor David Sinclair, who did Rogan a few times. He wrote on my thing, here's to you being the next Rogan. And that was very sweet. But at the same time, I don't, as much as Rogan is perhaps my biggest idol, I don't want to be a copy of Rogan's podcast. However, I will say what I do really enjoy is a lot of the same kind of fields that he's into. But if I had to describe my podcast, it's really it's me bringing on as a younger individual, people that I respect that are obviously for the most part generally older, and I try to go through this kind of emotional process with them of opening up. And I'll give you a good example. I think I had Lyman Good on recently. Lyman, great former Bellator champion, great UFC fighter. Yep. And he doesn't do a lot of press and doesn't do a lot of interviews. He's an amazing guy, truly amazing guy. But what I started to realize is if you get them talking a little bit, if you start to ask them questions about how they got in, not just like how'd you get into it, but like why did you get into it? What was burning inside you? Was MMA an outlet? Was comedy an outlet? Was acting a way for you to escape perhaps the fact that your situation at home wasn't very stable growing up? Then they start to open up. And what's been pretty amazing, to be honest, with some of the guests that I've had, is that on my podcast, I really try to not just, cover the questions that they've covered on other interviews, but really try to get into the psyche of what makes them tick as being perhaps some of the best in their field. And I think that's a common theme that I have with all my guests, is that all of my guests, whether they're famous or not famous, they're probably amongst the best in their field, or they just have simply amazing stories to share. And I think that, for me, it's not just an amazing opportunity to learn, but it's an amazing opportunity to sit down in a very relaxed setting and start to get at why are they successful and someone else isn't? Why is it that, like Lyman Good revealed this story that he had never told anybody, that for when he became Bellator champion, it was a 3-month tournament. Once per month they fought, and he slept in the cage every single night. He would drag his mattress in there, and he told me how he felt like come fight time, he felt like it was his territory. He felt like when he saw his opponent, it was I'm gonna go unleash my anger towards him because he's the reason I slept in the cage every night. And for me, that was like crazy story. I mean, like, you don't hear a lot of UFC fighters sleeping in cages. So for me, if I had to describe it, it's really just a relaxed version of trying to get people to open up and to see why are they the best at what they do? Why? And I think it's also an interesting angle because perhaps not a lot of I don't mean to humble brag, but I mean, like, there not a lot of younger kids are asking them. So I think the dynamic is very different from a successful man of 50 years old asking a Lyman Good rather than a 19-year-old who really looks up to a Lyman Good and trying to understand, even if I'm never going to be a professional fighter, why I can take things of how to be hopefully one day one of the best at my craft.
Right. So I think what I got out of that is you have to sleep with all your podcast stuff on all the time, 3 straight months, and then you're gonna have the best podcast ever. You're gonna win the championship. That's what I got.
I don't know. I can't listen to my voice. So I after about 10 minutes, after I listen to it and do all the edits from my audio engineer, I never listen to it again. But yeah, something like that.
It is funny, right? I hear that all the time. And then I have kids, right? I'm now 4 kids, 2 boys, 2 girls. Just had twin a couple weeks ago.
Congratulations.
And, thanks, brother. Thanks. And that's one thing. My 7-year-old son, he loves YouTube. It's like Ryan's World Toy Review. If you know what that is, it's like the best thing for kids. And he's like all about it. And like, we watch all YouTube on at home. It's like a smart TV. And sometimes it comes up, a Fight Bananas podcast comes up, and it just automatically plays, and I'm playing. And my son's like, Dad, you're on again. Like, come on, dude, change the channel. It's like, dude, I didn't do it, man. It's coming on. Like, Fight Bananas, it's on fire, son. What do you want me to do? But 2 more questions, then we'll get into some MMA stuff at the end. I have a little thing called Going Bananas. It'll be fun, man, at the end. One is all your shows so far, and correct me if I'm wrong, all have guests so far.
Yes.
Would you be interested in doing a podcast, just you, a story about, a graduation, a party story about a family Thanksgiving, something like that? Would you be interested in doing a podcast just on your own?
That's a good question. I think somebody asked me that the other day, and to be honest with you, as of right now, no. Just because I don't, because I'm still, on the younger side, and I haven't had like a massive career yet to get started. And even if it's not even just about that, I mean, I have a lot of great stories, I think. But I don't know. I think for me, I really love having guests on. I really love having just one guest at a time. That's what I always try to do as well. Just because I think it's a much more like intimate feel when you have one person. You're not worried about trying to get spread the love around. So for me, as of right now, I would have to say no. It's also, I think it's also just in my personality. I feel like, I don't know, I wouldn't want to listen to myself talk for an hour, so I don't know why somebody else would want to just listen to me talk for an hour. But it's also just because I really do enjoy so much having a guest there in the studio, or if it can be in the studio, and just the way things have been going, I'm just trying to carry on this momentum and see where it goes.
That's awesome, man. Guys, we're talking to Felix Levine, host of Where's This Going podcast. Love it. Last one, then we'll get into strictly MMA stuff. We mentioned it probably 10 times about your age. Okay, first of all, I kind of will throw the question out there, give you my answer, and then let you take it away. I think it's absolutely an advantage. I love it. There's just so much time for you to grow and add. I feel like you're just starting off fresh and you can do so many different things with it. You might be like, man, hey, this MMA thing, maybe I am going to go this way, or maybe I'm going to have just strictly guests inside the studio. We have a cool stuff you can see behind us. We have one here in Daytona Beach, Florida, and we love having guests in the studio. It's like we used to do crazy good Facebook Live shows and stuff like that, but life's busy. It's hard to get fighters in. They're traveling all over the world, so we do a lot of Skype stuff like we're doing now, a lot of phone interviews as well. It's just sometimes quicker and easier to get more content out, and it was cool. Like our sponsors want more content. iHeartRadio wants more content from us, so we're just trying to gear out, spit out stuff. So for one, like my point in all this is your age a disadvantage to some people, or some guests be like, dude, come on, man, you're 19. I'm not coming on your show. Like, what are you going to do? I think it's a total advantage. So I would like your take on that.
I think that's a fantastic question, and I think it goes both ways. I think when I first started, I think people would be like, it was interesting when I first started in my emails that I would send out to people, I would mention my age, and I think that in the beginning was a disadvantage because when you don't have a lot of episodes and you don't have any like something to prove, it's like, oh hey, I'm in college, want to come on my podcast. If that's the vibe that they're getting, they're like, not really. But once I started getting a few episodes, I started getting some good guests, I started getting some higher profile individuals. I started to realize that in some ways it was an advantage, and I think the first time that I really saw that was with Jon Anik, and because beyond the fact that I have so much admiration for the guy, and I think he's perhaps the best at what he does in the sports world. He actually tweeted at me, or when we had done our episode, he was like, man, like you're 19, like the world is your oyster, like go for it. And those words have always stuck with me. And I think now I think it's a combination of the fact that I'm younger and the fact that it's starting to gain some traction, I think is a great combination, because I think people are starting to be like, oh wait, you're younger, but you have X, Y, and Z on. Like, that's interesting. Yeah, I'll come on for sure. So I think in that way it's an advantage. I think sometimes still with sponsors, I think sometimes it could be at a disadvantage because they're like, are we really going to give this kid hundreds, thousands of dollars? He's 19, he's 20. The other way that it's a disadvantage is, as I mentioned, I am in college. So I'm a full-time student. So balancing the two, I was in Newport Beach, California this weekend, fly back to New York, come back to Boston, all within the span of 2 days. So all of that is a lot of work, managing a full podcast with, audio engineer, video engineer, producers to record at the studio, setting up appointments here and there. My main studio's in New York. I go to school in Boston, so it's like when I have a guest that's in New York that I really want, I'll have to go to New York for the day. So it's a lot of management things, but at the end of the day, I think what's the fact that I turned 20 tomorrow, which for me is weird, and to see where I'm at right now, I'm just honestly thrilled. And the fact that I started this 7-8 months ago, I really never imagined it'd be what it is, 8 months in. If you told me that I had, 5 or 6 UFC fighters, Jon Anik, and it's weird when I'm like texting them, or like I text them before a fight or after, or we'll go like Instagram DM, like all this stuff is very surreal to me. So let's just say, I think now it's starting to become more and more of an advantage. But in the beginning, it was definitely a struggle at times. But I'm honestly really grateful for where things are today, and it just motivates me to keep going.
Man, that's so dope, man. 20 years old, man. When I was 20, like I couldn't even order like off the McDonald's menu good. It was like, just give me the number one. It was so simple.
Well, yeah. It's also what's funny also is, speaking of age, is like, there a lot of, since I am in college, sometimes there's the parties here and there's this, that, and the other thing. And sometimes it does feel a little weird. Sometimes I do feel perhaps a little bit disconnected because, sometimes I'd rather work on my podcast or write emails than go to a party or do this, or I'll come home early. Like it's hard sometimes I do want to also be young and do all these things, but I'm like, wait, hold on. I got to do this, and the other thing. I got to text. I got to send my audio engineer this. So, it's weird, but at the same time, it's crazy because if in 8 months I've been able to get to this point and I'm super happy with where I'm at, for me it's like, wait, hold on, there's a lot here, and it's motivating.
Right, man. I would just say, yeah, honestly, keep it going, because if you're 25, 28 and you got the third hottest podcast in the world, you're making millions. It's like you can party anytime you want. You know what I mean? You can party a little bit more in style. man, just so happy for you and your success. So just keep it going.
That. Thank you.
All right, so let's go MMA, man. For one, Conor McGregor just took over the world this past weekend, 40 seconds knockout. It's awesome with having an MMA podcast, and we, talked about it before. We talked about, I had a show. My last podcast was all about Conor McGregor's back, and it was just what's going to happen next. He's great for numbers and ratings. It's cool. It's awesome. He's just one of those guys. Every person knows who Conor McGregor is. So for one, I would just love your take. How did you get into MMA? Who was the guy who kind of maybe captured, guy or girl? And, how did you get started into being a fan of mixed martial arts?
So, it starts and ends with Conor. I mean, I think it was back in 2015. I was always like, I was actually set on becoming a general manager in the NFL. That was my dream job. So for me, it was NFL all day. But then I heard of this Conor McGregor fellow, and I think it was right before his Aldo fight. And, then he knocks out Aldo in 13 seconds. And I'm like, wait, hold on, and you start to hear a lot about it. And then, I mean, his persona, his everything, he's a global superstar. So he, is really one of the main reasons I started to follow. And then I remember his previous last win in the octagon was I think 2016 Eddie Alvarez. I watched that fight, and it was just spectacular. And I watched that. I think that was the first card that I really watched in its entirety. That might not be true. I might have watched a few other ones, but that was my first one that I really was like, wow, like I love this stuff. And so it's him, it's Joanna, it's I mean, I could go down the list of people that I admire, but then to really, like, the last 4 or 5 years, I've really just kind of watched it religiously. I try to watch every card as much as I can. And so I think, and to see the sport kind of take off, and, in large part, of course, thanks to him, but then you start to really fall in love with all the personalities that are there week in, week out, the Megan O'Learys, the John Anicks, the Rogans, the Paul Felders. I mean, it's such a great little niche kind of community, I would say, and across promotions there are just so many fantastic fighters. And I think the thing that I love about UFC and MMA and Bellator and all those things is, I mean, you're asking two grown individuals to step into a cage that are conditioned at the highest level that a human can be conditioned. And it's one thing to have the conditioning, it's another thing to get punched in the face and also and bleed and break your bones and tear your ACL and continue in a fight. So, I mean, it's just to see the will of these people step into an octagon. And I had Jimmy Rivera on the show the other day, and I was like, dude, like, I really hope one day the 300th best UFC fighter gets paid the same way the 300th best NFL player gets paid, because, I mean, right. I don't think these guys, I know so many of these MMA guys that, teach at a gym full time just to make a stable living. And I think that that's absurd. I mean, if you're a full-time UFC fighter, you should be making enough money to live very, very, very comfortably, right. And not have to teach on the side. So, I think there's still a lot of work to be done on that side, but the UFC is a fantastic organization, and I just love the sport.
Right. A couple of things there. So I have 3 things. I'm writing notes down. You're saying it. I love it. One, I totally agree with you that we've been saying that a kind of while here on the podcast. For one, it's hard for fighters to get fights before they even make it to the UFC. And, when they make it to the UFC, it's like, okay, they make a good amount, but still not great. And then to get to the UFC, they have to take 2-3 years of their lives. And, they're making scratch. They're making like little scratch. I bet you college football players make more money with handshake deals than MMA, professional fighters. And, we've had over 100 guests on the show, and some of them are the best regional fighters in the world. And yet they work at Home Depot 40 hours a week just to maintain a house and maybe their significant other.
I mean, it's nuts, and it's not even just that. It's like, the other thing that does scare me about MMA, and that's the only thing that I wish was a little different, is because it's still a very brand new sport. There isn't all the data about all the CTE that's going to come out from a lot of these fighters. There isn't all the health risks that are associated with wearing 4-ounce gloves and getting punched in the face, for extended periods of time 4 times a year. So, these guys and girls are jeopardizing their lives and taking years off their lives to entertain. And for me, it's super sad when you hear, the story that you said about a guy, needing to work at Home Depot, or some of the fighters that I know that work, like, they literally train in the morning and then, coach for like 7-8 hours a day. And yeah, sure, they enjoy it. But at the same time, imagine if those other 7-8 hours in that day were devoted to a 3rd and 4th workout, or a massage, or a way to recover properly. Like, it would make the level of these fighters even greater. And so, I think it's unfortunate that a lot of these guys do need to work on the side, but I think one day it'll get to a point where it'll be, the UFC will make enough revenue. I mean, they make a ton of revenue, but it's not on a level of the NFL or the MLB or the NBA, and they can pay them accordingly.
Right, yeah, and I just think it's multiple years now with ESPN deals and Reebok deals, and who knows what's next, more streaming deals like that. I think it will come to that. Yeah, the top of the food chain is starting to make that scratch now, but you're right, it's at the bottom of the food chain, still not there. Two more things what you were saying about that, the humble beginnings, like the fighters and everyone we talk to and coaches, some of the best people in the absolute world, and I try to put like why, like they just can't be all these great people, and I'm like, what I put to it was they come from this struggle, and they're just in a gym, a ring, a bag, and they're working on themselves, they're working on their body, and they start, most of them, almost from nothing, and they just rise up. So they remember what it is to, with $7 in the bank account or eating on the dollar menu and like that stuff. So I feel like these fighters, they know what it is to struggle in the up cup. So I think that's why. And then the Joanna Jędrzejczyk story. So I'm down there at American Top Team, Coconut Creek, Florida. I live 3-4 hours away. Been down there 3-4 times. They're some of the best people on the podcast, ATT guys and girls. So we're down there. I'm down there for 2 days. And I don't know if you know who Junior Dos Santos is. He was a heavyweight champion. He's actually fighting this weekend, UFC Raleigh. So he's in the main event. And the first night we're there, he's in the cage. Their big octagon, and it's like whack, whack. He's hitting. It's like, we're like, oh my goodness. Like we take it for granted. Like, that didn't really connect. He's just bang. It's like thunderstrike. Then when next morning we get up, we'll go there again. Got a couple interviews lined up, and we hear it again. We're like, whoosh. We're like, oh my gosh. Wow, JDS is back in the cage. We walk around. It's not Junior Dos Santos. It's Joanna, a 120-pound woman. Just, I'm telling you, it was literally the Thor thunder. It was insane. It was like, oh my gosh. Like it was, I tell that story to everyone I can.
She is a beast.
Incredible. Just nuts.
She is absolutely amazing. And I think she, I'll be rooting for her to get her title back, but it'll be honestly at dog odds. I mean, it's a pretty good, plus 130, I think she sits at right now. It's a pretty nice price, but I mean, Weili Zhang she's phenomenal too. But Joanna I think Joanna probably five round decisions her. I don't think she's gonna put. Joanna's not a knockout artist, so I think. But it'll be tough because Weili Zhang packs a punch, man.
Yeah, she's a monster. It's one of those kind of new school versus old school fights. I like it a lot. I can't wait.
Exactly.
Last MMA question. Like I said, I got the Going Banana segment coming up. If you had to change one thing in 2020, or if there's something you would want to see, what would that be for mixed martial arts, particularly UFC? What would you like to see or change in 2020?
That's a good question. I think, I think what's already great is that we're getting so many more. I remember back in 2016, we'd have to wait a month to get a fight card. So That's always nice. I just want to see more guys that are deserving of getting title shots to actually get the title shots. I think Dana's an amazing boss, president UFC. However, I think him saying Aldo's going to get a shot at Cejudo, or these guys that are coming off, look, Romero is a deserving. He's had an amazing career, but I think if you're coming off a loss or two losses, I don't think you should be getting a title shot in anybody's book, So I think it's mostly, guys that I hope that the UFC starts to really line up guys that are coming off, a couple fight win streaks or 3, 4, 5 fights, or, I understand Connor's Connor. So if he slides in and gets a shot at Khabib, I'm not going to complain. I'm a fan. I want to see that fight, of course. But, I do hope he gets, at least one more fight before then, whether it's Masvidal, Gaethje, whoever it is. So I just, I don't know. As a fan, I would much rather see an Aljo Cejudo or a Petr Yan Cejudo rather than a Jose Aldo Cejudo. So I don't know. I hope that it goes more off the merit and less off of the what's going to sell. I understand the business side of it. I understand that they need to make money. Right. But at the same time, there's so many guys that because they don't talk like a Conor McGregor or a Colby Covington, they're not and they're maybe not as marketable from a personality standpoint. They're unbelievable fighters. So I just hope that it goes more off a merit standpoint rather than a marketing and promotion standpoint. Although I do understand why at times, you got to set up the big fight if it's there.
Right. No, I hear you. There's pros and cons both sides. Yeah, there really is. I see it and I definitely get it. And I hear that a lot actually. But then it's like, sometimes, and then where does it end? It's like, okay, I get the Conor thing, but does it work for him? And I get the Aldo thing. So yeah, it goes back and forth. It's tough.
And I also think one other thing that I hope to see is I think Rogan's been really preaching about it recently is the scoring and the judges. I think having just 3 judges, it gets crazy. I think he was really right. There should be at least perhaps 5 or 9 judges, so you have a tiebreaker. So you have a higher volume and a more accurate result process, or because I think guys that are getting robbed of decisions. I think the most recent one that I remember was Cody Stamann and Song Yadong. And no disrespect to Song Yadong, he got a point taken away and he's a great fighter, but there's no way that should have been a draw. Stuff like that. I mean, you're dealing with, and for us as fans or as gamblers, sure, it matters to an extent. But these guys, they train 3-4 months. They got to pay their coaches. That win bonus is half of their paycheck sometimes. So, that stuff really matters. And when you put it in the hands of people who have never been in the octagon, or people that really sure, they're experts to an extent, and you only put it in 3 different people's hands, and it's up to those 3 people and what they see, I think, and also it's a very different angle when you're cage side and when you're watching on a screen, So right. I think just having a higher volume of people to score these things and more accurate judging is a big priority that they need to get.
That's so funny you said that. Probably the number one thing we've talked about on the Fight Bananas podcast, probably the biggest thread, over 140 episodes. We talked to Dave Feldman with Bare Knuckle FC. He's the promoter, and he really might pick this up. There should be a scoreboard. It's 2020, soccer, baseball, basketball, football. Right. I know what the score is. Imagine in the Super Bowl, the Atlanta Falcons and the Patriots were playing in the comeback zone, and you don't know what the score is.
100%.
At the end of the game, be like, Patriots won, or it's overtime. And then I'm not even messing with judges or how they scored, but just at the end of first round, blue side, red side.
Well, even if it's not that, I think they should the judges should have the statistics in front of them of significant strikes landed, stuff like that. Just so, because I think a lot of these judges, they'll see what they see, but when we're looking at it and one person's clearly outlanding, maybe they're not as significant, but they're outlanding, But I do agree. I think the only reason that they wouldn't do that is because, say you're up 2 rounds, then generally speaking, that 3rd round they're gonna just get out of the way and touch and go because they know that literally all they have to do is survive, and they win. So I think that's the downside as a fan, because it'd probably be like a race to win the first 2 rounds, and then if you have somewhat of a gas tank, you can just pedal around for a while. So in that sense, and it's the more traditional boxing approach, combat sports approach of don't leave it to the judges, go out there and knock your opponent out. So yeah, but I do think that at least there should be, the scoring needs to be revised in some fashion.
Right, and I get that too. But an MMA fight, I feel like the guys who run around will get caught. I don't know, but that is one of the negatives I've heard about it. But I just think, just imagine oh wow, after the first round he did win, and if you're a submission guy and you think you're winning the fight, and now you can see it, it's just so much. But right. All right, man. Like I said, here we go. 10 questions. We call it Going Bananas.
Let's go.
You ready? I'm
ready.
You ready? All right.
Am I giving you 1-word answers?
1 word, essay. First thing comes to your head.
Beautiful.
10 minutes. It's your show. You can do whatever you want.
Love it.
Your number 1 wish guest for your podcast.
So in a dream world, it's got to be either Joe Rogan or Barack Obama, or Kobe or LeBron or an Ellen DeGeneres. I think one of those 5 I would love. I always told people, or a Conor McGregor. So all those people right now, we still got a long ways to go. But I always tell my friends, if I get one of those, I'm retiring. But that's one of the dreams. I have so much respect for all those people in so many different ways. So maybe one day.
Wow, Dory on the list. I like that. Your favorite all-time sports moment?
Oh, that's a tough one. Man, I don't even know. But to be honest, if we're gonna stay in the UFC realm, just because I'm thinking of UFC right now, I'll always remember when I saw Conor knock out Eddie. I mean, it was really that one of those first moments where I felt like I was witnessing something just absolutely spectacular. I mean, that was probably one of the best performances I've ever seen. And I was in Pittsburgh. I was in a hotel room with my dad. I mean, I always remember where I was. That, or to be honest, Tyson Fury and Deontay Wilder. Because just everything that Fury went through, and to see him, quite frankly, just absolutely outbox Wilder. And if he didn't get caught, I still think he should have won. Besides that 12th round, but I remember after once he got up, which was a miracle. I remember after that fight, I literally almost had tears in my eyes because I was thinking of like everything this man has gone through to put on that performance. In my opinion, he won. To see that happen was just was one of the most beautiful things because it was a mixture of masterclass boxing, but mostly like, mental health and battling and cutting 150 pounds and everything that he went through. So that was one of my all-time favorites.
Love it. Love it. Who's the greatest rapper of all time?
Ooh, that's a tough one, man. I don't know. I think Eminem has got to be up there.
Okay.
He just released I think his new album, or a couple great songs that I was listening to the other day.
Right.
Man, Dr. Dre, a rapper in that ballpark, producer. Yeah, I'd have to stick with those. There's so many good ones.
Right. Okay. What TV channel do you watch the most?
Ooh, I don't, I'm like you. I stream a lot of my stuff. I go down YouTube holes very often.
Oh yeah.
So I'd probably say it's got to be like the ESPN and YouTube at this point. I honestly don't have that much time these days to watch a lot of Netflix and stuff like that. I'd rather work on something. Right now I'd have to say it's definitely got to be YouTube and ESPN because there's so much great content.
All right, so it's your birthday. Here's your present. Here's your birthday present. YouTube, hold this. Look up Jimmy Fallon Box of Lies.
Okay.
You can watch 40 of them in a row. You'll crack up for hours and hours. The guest Box of Lies.
I'll check it out after. 100%.
Your favorite day of the week?
Ooh, well, I love me an NFL Sunday. Just because I try to free up my Sunday so I can just sit there and watch all the games. Now I'm really loving to start my Saturday. I love my Saturday nights as well. I think honestly the Friday, Saturday, Sunday, just there's always a good vibe on those days, I'd say. And then but I love a Sunday where you can wake up, have a little breakfast, and watch football. That'll always be one of my favorite traditions.
For sure. Your favorite app?
My favorite app. To be honest, these days I'm too often on Instagram and Snapchat and all that stuff and Twitter. But honestly, I think Twitter is there's so much good content there, just from memes to people tweeting to. So right now, I'd probably say it'd have to be Twitter.
Okay.
Or messages if I'm texting people. But yeah.
So far in your podcast, who has been your favorite guest?
Oh, that's tough. I can't answer that one, but and I love them all in different ways. There are so many, to be honest. I don't think I could pick one. But all of them have been so touching in different ways, and I've learned something from every single one of them. And there's some that I've developed really close relationships with. I had Billions actor Malachi Weir. I don't know if you watch Billions. He was Lonnie on Billions. So him and I have actually gone really close. I have. Right up there, if you can see it in the top corner, is a picture that he's also a photographer that he gifted me. So he's been really good. I mean, Lyman recently I went and I trained with him a little bit. He held pads for me. So there's so many different guys. I mean, Anik has just been so nice, and it's just been unbelievable to even know him. Same with Mark Normand. I mean, I could go on and on. Each one of them has brought a little something to my life that I'm grateful for, and so I couldn't tell you one favorite guest, but just knowing all these individuals have been amazing.
Man, I got to pause the show real quick. I got to pick up all the names that you're dropping right now. Just pause 1 second. Two more for you. Who's your favorite superhero?
I'll be really honest with you. I don't watch a lot of. I never was super into the superhero
Ooh,
worlds. However, I think I'd have to go with Batman. I love Dark Knight Rises. I love all those movies.
okay.
So definitely Batman if I had to pick one.
Okay. Last one. 2021. If you had a goal for Where's This Going podcast, what would it be?
And it's a great question. There's a couple of very big guests that we're in talks with that I want to get on as soon as possible, of course. I want to be at a point where with sponsors and everything that I can travel to a guest when I feel like it, that I can have someone run my social media, that I can have somebody that maybe one day I could have my studio, my own studio and my own people. Honestly, financially, I'm very happy with where it's at. But if there was a way where I could make a lot of money from sitting down with great people, I mean, that sounds like an absolute dream. So I think that's a big thing. But just continue to stick to my process in working really hard. That's one thing that I really try to pride myself in, and is really important to me. Is no matter what guests you get, no matter who's shouting you out, no matter how much success you have, is to continue to just sit down and grind out those emails and do things to the highest ability that I can. So where I see the show going, I mean, 8 months ago, if you would have told me that I would be interviewed by you, or that I'd be invited on a show, or that I'd have, the people that I've had on, I'd say you're absolutely nuts. So at this point, it's really just continuing to never take my foot off the gas pedal, and to just continue to make content that hopefully people can take something out of the same way that, when I was back in Santa Barbara listening to Joe Rogan on my bike, the same way that I was inspired and taking something away from listening to him speak. So, just continue to push myself in absolutely every regard.
Dude, that's awesome, man. I had a pleasure. Usually we do a 20, 30 minute. This has been 46. It sounds like it's been a couple. Yeah, man, we'll go down again. We'll do like a 3-hour marathon.
Whatever you want, man.
Absolutely, man. I'm telling you guys, Space Coast Botanicals, they're sponsoring this show right here. I'll have him send you some. I'm telling you, it's so good. It will change your life. I take baths in it. It's just it's phenomenal.
Space Coast Botanicals. Go buy some, people.
There you go. There you go. Man, Where's This Going podcast? Felix Levine, man, appreciate you for coming on. Continue success. You got a subscriber in us. Hopefully we'll keep passing the word. I'm going to tell my family, my friends, my neighbors. I'm going to tell my enemies about you. I want everyone to hear Where's This Going podcast.
Hey, man, I appreciate all those words. And same with you. I will promote all your content. And it really is when you hit me up, it's an honor to be invited on someone else's show. It's weird always for me to be invited on, because I'm so used to being the one writing the questions and getting the guests out. And so for you to have me on, man, whenever you want, we can run it back. And I appreciate the time, and I wish you all the best, because what you're doing is, you've got that grind mentality, that very work hard mentality, and I respect that. And I just appreciate the opportunity, man. Thank you so much.
Absolutely, man. I embrace the chip on the shoulder. I embrace it.
Always.
Happy birthday to you. Continue success. We'll talk to you soon.
Thank you, man. Talk to you soon.
Brother. All right.